Morning. My lighting's bad, eh? Yeah, a little better. My arms look long. Good morning, YouTubers. Or afternoon, whatever it might be. I'm in a much better mood now. A little more awake. Fresh coffee. Yummy. Got all that belly aching out of my system. Poor YouTube and Rumble. I got a little more belly aching I could do. I could belly ache about my government. As a Canadian, I don't know how that works, but I would definitely sign an impeach Justin Trudeau. Whatever. Right? If we just started that on the internet, those things that pop up once in a while. You could do it over the gun thing, over his raise during COVID, and his the truckers, all that stuff that he did. The donations to his wife's charity. Just there's so many things you could, and those are just the things that I know of off the top of my head. The man's a scumbag. Glad to have gotten that out of my chest as well. Turn this off. Not that it matters because my voice is small. But I would sign it, and then if it was like a million voices or something like that, or a couple million Canadians, I don't know how many of the Canadians there even are. So I got rid of the flat earth rocks thing. I scratched out a bunch of these, but then I wasn't allowed to I wasn't allowed to upload it because of the kicked off thing, so I deleted it off my phone because I was needing space. Ooh, that's a neat one. Okay, that's a good one. God's power and the Hebrews getting off path. That's the topic. Part 1. The second point will be the prayer in one voice, will be a prayer of joy in the times of tribulation. But when the Hebrews aren't living right, it's not that God stops watching or he takes the power away. It doesn't work like that. And then gives it to Edom, right? Or to the Gentiles right now, this day and age. And Edom, they kind of both hold it, but they're working together, so they don't care because they're both on against God, the Catholics and Edomites. They're more about human control and a humanistic thought of like the Pope being the great human. You know what I mean? I speak to God for you. Yeah. See, there are people who speak to God for us. They're prophets, and it's just a spiritual gift. And some people have it, and some people can get a word from the Holy Ghost and just spew it out. And it can be a lot of things. It can be futuristic. It can be a lot of things. As we can see in the Bible, it can be multiple references to the same sentence. Anyway, the the power that comes down from God think about Jesus. Jesus was right in the center of that power. So he encompassed all of it, right? So it's so hard to explain. So when he wanted to raise the dead, he could do that. When he wanted to walk on water, he could do that. When he wanted to heal people, he could do that. If he wanted to rebuke a storm, he could do that. So could you. So could I. So can everybody. If you can speak, you can do those things. You could do all of those things, or you could do one of those things, right? Baal. I can never get his name right, but the guy on the donkey. He was a wizard, right? And he was a special kind of wizard where he used like wax and things to tell the future. And he'd mix and carve little wax sculptures, and then he'd melt them all into a bowl or whatever, and they would act out, and he would see things within the wax, right? As he added them to the hot water, they would do things, and he would see what future events were. So that's God's power, but it's just like here's God's power, and that's like this little piece of it that comes out here. It's like one of the little things that you can do through God. And he lived right here. And he focused, and he was raised that way. Right from a little kid. He was 15 the first time he's mentioned in the Book of the Jews. And I forget which army calls him, but I think it was Africa. The king of Africa. Anyway. So he's just this tiny little... on this tiny little piece of power, right? Here's Jesus is over here in the main channel, right? So Jesus could do that. But with that, you also get the prophetic side, which is from God, right? You can do all the wax and all that shit and tricks and card readings and stuff like that, or even the stones, which I do. It's all in this thing. But then out here, you have like the prophetic knowledge of God, where it just comes from God. And actually it'd be the other way around. It'd be right here, where you just get it from God, and Baal did too. And then you get it out here, you get it through spells and inclinations, and you can actually kind of cohort it to come out in a specific matter. Right? Because God's only going to tell you stuff that he wants you to know, or whatever, what he thinks best for your trail in life. And that's why Jesus didn't do all the tricks of that trade, where he'd go that extra step of using the wax and whatnot. He just said he just accepted and lived toward the knowledge that God gave him, and had the faith that God would tell him the knowledge that he needed to know in order to move forward in his life, and he wouldn't need to go out and figure out what that other step was, because God will deal with that step when I get there. Right? You know, it's like if there's an ocean in front of you, and your destination's over here, or a river, let's say, make it simple, and you walk. It's not until you get to the river that God moves it, builds a bridge, whatever it is, so that you can keep moving, right? This is faith. That is the works of faith. But walking up to it, knowing, okay, well, I don't need that. I don't need the bridge yet. Like, the bridge will get there when I get there. I'll keep working. And the way I do it personally in my life is that I work internally so that the external flows, right? As long as I prepare for it, whatever it is when it comes, I'll be prepared for, and it won't matter, and I'll just walk through it. When I get to, like Moses parting the sea or whatever, right? It wasn't until he got to the sea that it parted. It didn't part for him before he got there. And he was like, oh, well, don't worry, guys. Look, the sea's open. It's dried out. No, he got to the side, and God said, do this. And he said, okay. And then, boom, there you go. Now go through, right? So that's the living in faith, right? So that living in faith thing puts you closer to the center when it comes to the futurities. But you can also think about that when it comes to all knowledge, all wisdom is God. So if you walk in wisdom, or if you are working in wisdom, all of it, all that knowledge, it's all God, right? And so much of it gives us power. Now you could say that there's more power in the and this is just a matter of opinion with different people. Say there's more power in gas engines than there ever would be in telling the future. So I'm just going to focus on inventing my gas engine, and then I'll make it better, and I'll live on that branch of knowledge. And there's a lot on that branch of knowledge, because it's not just an IC engine that you're going to actually work with. You're going to end up working with the whole chassis system of a car, and then you're going to have to, well, really, you're going to need all the minerals and all that kind of stuff. So you're in this knowledge of the solid, but it's still knowledge, so it's God. It's just how we apply it. Again, if you take it back to Balaam, he wanted to apply it against God's will at one point. And that's when he got into the Bible, right? But he's in the book of the Jews a bunch, but he's only in the Bible a little bit. But he tried to go against God's will, and he ended up having to bless them, or God was going to kill him. And that's where you learn that he did have a prophetic connection to God. So he worked in God's knowledge, but usually he worked for darker means. But he got away with it all the time because it wasn't going against God's direct plan. So God doesn't interfere much with man. He gives us these options, right? That's freedom. God's not the government. He's God, right? That if he was the government, he'd come down, he'd say, live this way, stay in this box, do this, feed them, do that, do this, go to work, right? he's not. So he has to let us do our thing, and gave us the earth, and then we lost it to Satan. So now it's really Satan's domain. So God flipped that on him and made it into his prison. Put the top on it. Said, okay, well, there you go. That's your domain then, all right? You're grounded. And so he's like a little kid. He's laying on his back, screaming and kicking his feet. But now he stopped screaming and kicking his feet. And he's that little kid that's being bad and mischievous, trying to destroy things in their own room in order to be heard and to kick up dust, right? So that's what he's doing. Like, he's breaking his toys, and he's trying to break all this stuff, kicking holes in the wall or whatever it is to try to, show God, right? I can't hurt you, but I'll hurt everything that you got. Not realizing that he's hurting his own stuff, right? Like the kid that breaks his toys. It's like, well, you don't have your toys, you dummy. You gotta get control over yourself. So, anyway, I keep going way off topic on this one. How much time do I have? Quite a bit. So, we can all walk in that line of what Jesus did. Try to just have faith in most of that knowledge. Fill yourself up with knowledge, of course. But I mean, you don't have to focus on telling the future or fucking whatever, manipulating the weather, and just focus on being yourself and being in the best standing of that knowledge that you can be. So when the Hebrews stepped out of that God's path, right, they started acting like heathens. So they started like sodomizing boys and stuff like that. Like, it got bad. That's what the original gyms, the Greek gyms, were just that. It was a place for wrestling and practicing for the games, but they did it all naked, and they usually wanted to wrestle teenage boys against men. There'd be full penetration and all that. And it was only men were allowed in there. And then the Hebrews, of course, built one for themselves. They kept doing shit like this. Now they're being kept, like Edom took their heritage, said it's our heritage. That was our history, not your history. You don't have a history. You're just from Nigeria. And that's why the N-word became what they called them, right? They called them that because it'd be like saying, rather than calling me an Edomite or a Irish guy or a Scottish guy or whatever I am, you could say, you Canadian, you Canadian, you Canadian, you Canadian, you fucking Canadian, you're a fucking Canadian. And eventually that's just going to stick. That my history is Canada, Canadian history. Like that's where I'm from, and its history is very short. So I don't really have a history. I'm just nothing. I was just this little brief blitz in history. But the Hebrews got into a diaspora and got pushed down to Nigeria land or whatever the hell it's called. And so that's where they got stuck. It's right on the coast, right in southern Africa, and they kind of like they hit the wall, and then And all the Africans hated them, so they were pushing them out of the cities and fighting them and killing them and taking slaves of them and doing all this shit to them and kept pushing them out, pushing them out, pushing them further from Israel. And then they got grabbed in the ships and told they were slaves, took their heritage, changed their names, separated the families, and we know that history. You know it from there, right? Don't you? I would hope. If you're watching this video, that you know the history of American slave trade and the whole slave trade. And then they just started shipping them all over the place and putting them to work, selling them like they, and telling people that they actually told the Edomites owned the boats, right? And they owned the farms. So then they'd go to a Gentile and they said, in order to civilize yourselves from being slaves of mine, you have to own slaves of your own. And they wrote this in papers and stuff, and they did a big thing about it. You can go look it up, and that's what that was like. The propaganda of it was, they said, like, because the Gentiles were just fucking slaves up to this point as well, right? That's how I have Edomite in me, is like my ancestors were raped probably at some point or whatever, you know what I mean? It's not like it was some big happy thing. So then the stealing of their heritage started, and the Gentiles, yes. So they said, you guys have to civilize yourselves. Stop being slaves. In order to stop being slaves, here's a farm. You manage it. Here's a bunch of slaves of your own. Once you learn how to manage slaves, you'll class yourselves up a bit. And then you'll become evolved to the next race of humans. And you won't be that lower race of humans, right? All war has been about racism, and money, power, not religion. People always say, oh, it's religion, all wars were religion. No, they weren't. And even like King Arthur and stuff like that, he was a religious man, he loved God and all that stuff, but I mean, he was Greek. Anyway, he took over Israel as part of his conquering, and gave rise to the Hermodians, because he gave all the land to his generals, and his generals, I don't remember it all. It's complicated, but it was very interesting. Yeah. I don't want to quote it all because I'll fuck it up. I'll fuck up the timeline. Anywho, so the Hebrews got out of walking in that path of what God's power is, and then you're not protected by him anymore. You're not with him anymore. He doesn't see you. By that it means his powers on the earth. Well, I'm sure that the people who are most close to walking in it shine a little more to his sight, the way he sees. Something like that. Fuzzy, but definitely it's quoted that he sees you. So anyway, and once you're in that light, you're protected just by the energies, and just by the knowledge and the wisdom in your own head protects you, because you're going to make better choices, better decisions, and all that kind of stuff. But also the spiritual realm is being manipulated when you walk in. Things change spiritually that you don't see. When you walk into a room, it forces other spirits to leave because they can't be in the light. If you're in a dark room full of shadows and then I flick the light switch on, the shadows are gone. They can't exist because the light's there. Right? So when you walk into the room as the light with you, the shadows can't possibly exist. The sins, that side of, like the devil, the minions, whatever you want to call it, the demons, obviously can. We still fight with them, but it shakes up their whole world. Everything changes, and a lot of them leave and fight, and they'll start kicking and screaming and doing different things, getting burned. And then the ones that can fight you best will start coming right at you and attacking full on because they don't want you there. They don't want that light there. They want you to walk over here. So if you're in fear, or if you're in lust, or if you're in whatever, right? So you walk into the room, the slutty woman will come right over. Right? Because she's under the control of that demon, and that demon is like, okay, well, it's my job to fight that guy because he's mine. I know him. Right? If that demon recognizes you, it's going to be like, oh, fuck, I know that guy. And go right to you and save the rest of the demons that are in the room from that light that you brought with you. Because once you step out of that walking path, and the light's not with you anymore, so that's the Hebrews getting off path. So that's why when they start to walk right, shit will just change. They won't have to do anything. It's not like a movement that they'll fucking do. It's freaky. It's fucking cool, but it's freaky. Okay, this week I fucking got into a fight, not a fight, but like threatened. Lost a job, fucking, I can't even remember all the other things I got kicked out of YouTube, fucking, I don't remember what the other thing was, but there was some other stupid thing. It was all this shit, and it all started just sprinkling onto me all at the same time. Oh, and then there's this woman who's kind of offering herself, but not, she just wants sex. She doesn't want a relationship, right? So she just wants to bang somebody, and it's like, no, it's not. But it's hard to fucking say no, I'll tell you. Like, that's the most tempting thing ever, and she's got anything that you could ever want. Now there's two of them, maybe. Maybe. I don't think so, though. Anyway. So, it was a Victoria Day or whatever, holiday. I just took a day off, went into the woods, fucking chilled out, did my plan that I was going to do anyway, because it was my day off. And then I got up the next day, and got resumes printed up, started going through the paces of looking for a job, and I was holding the resumes, and I thought, I don't need these. This is God. Something's going on. And I just said, I keep fucking it up, putting my will, forcing my will into what he's doing. I'm just going to let him do it. I'll give him the week or whatever he needs, and I'm just going to relax again. And I just threw them aside and just said, no, there's something going on. I'm going to walk in faith or whatever. So I just stood in the storm, basically. It all clicked. Everything clicked. And it was like this storm of shit going on all around me, but none of it was affecting me. And I was looking at it like kind of confused, thinking, well, the whole thing was confusing, But then I was even more confused because it wasn't hurting me. I wasn't scared. I wasn't sad. I wasn't. It was just whatever. It's all this shit. Yeah. Just forget about it. Just throw your resumes aside. Don't worry about them. Pray to God. And then I fucking. Right in the midst of all of this going on, I would watch church like I always do, and I fucking prayed with the at the end of a sermon, which I don't always do, but I do once in a while. And it's a saving prayer, right, where you confess to God or whatever, and so you confess the death, burial, resurrection of God, of Jesus, and for the first time, I had absolutely zero doubt. There's this little burning at the pit of my heart that's been there. Just of this doubt of, just little things, whatever, right? And, no, it's just gone. There's none. It just popped. Poof. And I just said, okay, no, this is all right. Everything's right. And I went about my day. That was all on the second day, Tuesday, whatever, after the holiday. And right first thing in the morning, actually. So I went about the rest of that whole day and just had a great day. Went back out into the woods and did all kinds of stuff. I think I hung out with kids. My son and his sister. And then I woke up the next morning and got a text message. You got a job interview at 1:30. Go to this place, from fucking the chef at my other restaurant. And I said, okay, thanks. And went in. And it wasn't a fucking job interview. But he was like, yeah, so when do you start? And here's your paperwork and this and that and the other. It was just a hiring. It felt like a fucking second or third interview or whatever. It was like, whoa, bang, here you go. And yeah, everything just snapped together, right, in the storm. And more is snapping together about that storm. And I'm still in a fucking storm. I'm still living in a van and shit, right? Just started another new job, whatever. Like, all this shit's going on still. But it's fine. Right? It's my path right now. It's just where I'm at. It's fine. It's where I'm supposed to be. And it is where I'm supposed to be. I'm not off of the path. Or whatever.